As I've been exploring the future of work, I've found it really interesting talking to designers and design leaders. And when I do, I keep running into the same question underneath all of these different conversations. With all of the tools that we have at our disposal, what do you actually have to be good at now? Now that the tools can generate a reasonable looking interface in seconds, what's the thing that still matters? Stephen Patterson, my guest today, has been a design leader in FinTech for over a decade. He's built in-house design teams at companies like Braintree and Highnote, and he's one of those designers who can also code, which, as you'll hear, turns out to be really, really relevant right now. A few things from this conversation that I genuinely couldn't stop talking about after we stopped recording. The first is this. Stephen describes a new kind of sameness spreading across digital products. Same fonts, same grids, same feel. What I like to call the AI equivalent of what Bootstrap did to the web 10 years ago. Tailwind as the new Bootstrap is something that I've heard and I've been repeating ad nauseum because I think it really does resonate. It's a clean way to name something that I think we've all been noticing but couldn't articulate with all of these AI-generated websites and tools and all that kind of stuff. And it requires everybody who's generating something new to have an elevated sense of what is the look and feel and branding, and what are they actually trying to achieve with the thing that they're building from a design perspective. The second is where he says the real design skill is moving. It's not the pixel perfect Figma execution, but it's moving upstream. The brand system, the voice, the principles, the visual rules, the tools that are pulled from, and the thing that tells AI what to make. That reframing really struck with me. And the third thing is something that he says near the end of our conversation that I think is the best single test I've heard for whether a creative person will thrive in this environment. And he says it's not being afraid of the terminal. And I think that's important for a couple of reasons, because it's not just about the terminal and being comfortable with tools like Claude Code and Codex. It's about getting comfortable with tools you otherwise thought weren't for you. And I think that applies across discipline. So that's the episode in a nutshell. Let's get into it, because this was a super interesting conversation with, I think, a lot of really practical, applicable learnings. Stephen Patterson, thank you for taking the time today. One of the things that I've been really obsessed with learning more about or trying to really identify a problem space in is like talent generally. So how are things so rapidly changing? And so you had a really thoughtful post about how good enough in terms of design and stuff like that is rampant now. It's like really easy to get that with AI tools. But I'd love to hear a little bit more about that specifically and what you're seeing today in terms of what are the kinds of issues that you're running into as a hiring manager? What are you seeing in terms of attitudes, profiles, all that kind of stuff?
So there's still, for any given design role, if you're having hundreds, potentially thousands of candidates, you're going to get a variety of portfolios. And obviously there's only so many you can realistically go through and actually like on a daily basis. And while I would say that it's not with the introduction of kind of various the AI tooling and people vibe coding and stuff like that, like I think it is slowly shifting, but I would say we still see a variety of portfolios or people kind of presenting work in a variety of ways. But I think there is this discussion, I think, within design and design hiring is like there's AI tools can help expedite design in terms of like the production of work, but there is this layer of sameness or this kind of like vanilla feel to generated AI, whether it's using the same typefaces or the same grids or the same formula that you see across websites or like products.
Something I heard recently was like Tailwind is the new Bootstrap, right? Like it was like 10 years ago, like everything had kind of like the same like bootstrappy vibe.
Like even with code, if you talk to Claude or Cursor or something like that, they might pull from Tailwind or maybe like a library like ShatCN. You get these components that kind of all, maybe they're using interfonts and they all have the same feeling, which from a design standpoint, it's like it's a good grid system. It's very a Swiss type. It has all of those standard practices that I feel like designers would say this is best practices and good to use and stuff like that. But I think there is this level of what's on brand or original, or is this kind of how it should be represented? And so I think coming back to like design hiring and stuff like that, it's finding people that understand those things. There isn't like a level of sameness across their work, or they're just pumping things out there, but there's no originality to it, no kind of like feeling to it. And I think that's where, designer that can choose or decipher or go through that AI process with kind of best practices, originality, using kind of modern tools. There's this navigating that, I think, a little bit. And I think, yeah, some of my comment in LinkedIn was around that in terms of being able to choose and design thinking, and those practices are still relevant and still at play, even if everything looks really nice and really polished. It's okay, like, how did you get there? What problems do they solve? Like those underlying pieces to design, I think.
Yeah. Has your hiring process changed to account for things like that? Or are these more you have to put more work into the filters?
I think there hasn't been, I think, a huge process shift. There's still, I think, from a design standpoint, this kind of reviewing work in some format, whether it's someone sending you a link to their portfolio or a PDF or some work that they've done. Like I know with engineers, it seems like it's shift to like utilizing AI tools and like code tests and things to whittle out, can they do this type of work, or what level are they at, depending on types of the quality of code that they get for a certain prompt or insight. But I feel like, yeah, design has this level of taste where I feel like you can't really tell an AI like, is this good design for bad design? Especially for, I feel like a design role can vary depending on if you're going to a really technical company or kind of a lifestyle type company like an e-com brand versus FinTech, or a brand, like what you want your designer to, the skill set they have can vary a lot. And so I don't think like a portfolio that might work for one might not work for another. So there is a little bit of that with design, where like taste and quality and what a company is looking for in their candidate goes into play a little bit more than, I think, coding. It's very much input output, like what's the quality of this, and do they know what they're doing, and are they like, do they really know Next.js or React, or what kind of libraries do they use, and that kind of thing, where I wouldn't say it's like directly binary, but I think in the age of AI tools, there's a level of AI is going to spit out this code, and can you be like, is this a good quality code or is this bad quality code? You go from there, where design is very much more nuanced, I think, there.
Yeah. So I do want to continue like digging in or like pulling that thread in particular, but I realized I also just jumped right into the conversation and it was like, here's what
Oh,
we were
all good.
talking about. Let's like talk about this,
Hey,
a very particular thing. First of all, you were traveling. You were in Japan. How was that?
it was good. So yeah, I guess the whole backstory. So yeah, my family and I've been traveling for 6 months actually. So we just got done with a 6 month. I was working during this time, but we did a 6 month trip
Yeah.
starting in September. Mostly as my kids are 2 and 3, so it's like just before like starting to hit school age, and so I don't know, we made the crazy like thing to sell our house and go on this kind of big trip before we kind of got locked into school year and all that kind of stuff. So we're actually
That's
like just
amazing.
kind of Japan was the last piece of that. So we're transitioning back into real life.
That's
Um,
amazing. So you guys made a decision to do 6 months of traveling, like, with your kids before they were, like, school age and you had to settle down somewhere.
Correct.
What were the things that led up to that decision? That's wild.
So yeah, so so yeah, we live in Detroit. So we've been here for 5 years. Obviously, I have two younger kids, and knew that obviously like school was coming up, and we'd be beholden to school schedules and holidays and all that kind of stuff. And I think with where we were at our house, we knew we needed to move into kind of a different lifestyle, house, bigger living conditions. So I think with that, my wife had always talked about doing kind of some large trip like this. And so it came up in that conversation, like, hey, do we just transition into this house? Or since we're both working remote, there's this opportunity to like potentially take the show on the road, I guess. Yeah. For a period of time. Then it was, basically just conversations with work to make it work with the team and timing and all of that. And we didn't do a super aggressive timeline. And it was like a month in each location with kids. So it was a little softer in that as far as it wasn't super rapid, a new place every week or every 2 weeks. So we tried to integrate per place for a period of time. So that was, a choice we made too, just with having kids and trying to feel comfortable in the place. So I came about as an opportunity and certain things aligning and trying to get that to work. And we made it work. And it was, I would say it had its ups and downs, definitely with the 2
I'm
and
sure.
3-year-olds. So there's really high highs and some low lows during the travel experience. Yeah.
Oh man, where all did you go?
So we started in Europe. So we did a month English countryside. So in the UK, the southwest of the country in Cornwall. And then we did a month in Copenhagen, and then in Lisbon. And then we went down to like Mexico City, Oaxaca. I had a friend that was getting married in Oaxaca.
Oh,
So
sweet.
we were there for a little bit, split it between those two. And then, then we did Australia and then Japan. Yeah. So then we came back. So mostly full world trip.
That's awesome. I want to ask actually if we take it back to you're in the spot right now where you and your wife were both working remotely. You're working in fintech right now.
Correct. Yeah.
And your companies were supportive. This is really awesome. I'm genuinely curious about just the trajectory of your career. If we were to just like rewind and how did you get into design in the first place? Is that where you started your career? Yeah, tell me more about what did school look like for you? What did you think your career was going to be? Where did you get started?
Yeah. Taking it back to college, I was a communications liberal arts major / studio art minor. So it was definitely, I did a lot of hands-on art, painting, drawing, standard, I think, graphic arts, alongside just like a variety of more of a liberal arts degree. So I went kind of to more of a private school. And then after that, kind of was trying to find my way into what I wanted to do a little bit. And then eventually found my passion wanting to really go into design, but I didn't really necessarily know the tooling, which at the time was predominantly just like Adobe tools and Quark Express, if you remember that.
Wow.
But I went to portfolio school in Chicago to learn those skills, which I think was really helpful because there was a lot of people in a lot of the industry that taught there because a lot of it was night classes. So after their day jobs at certain agencies or in-house studios would teach there.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, so that's where I honed my skills a bit. And like the whole schooling it was one of those like 1-year program. You're creating like a portfolio of work to come out of there to hopefully get like a junior intro job. And
tell me, how long ago was this or like whenabouts was this? And did UX look like UX at the time, or was it more like visual design, graphic design stuff that you were doing?
it was still screens, but a lot at that time. My first job was at FCB, the agency, and working on the Discover card app at the time. And it was all Photoshop at that time. So there was a thing called like layer comps where you basically could change the different states of things. So you'd have one canvas and go through all the states of that design through that. So it was you're designing in pixels and it's using a lot of layers and clicking through screens in a way within Photoshop. People were, I feel like, using Photoshop or Illustrator, but both tools weren't really built to design screens, but that was just get the idea down of what we should build. So that was like my first role was more of a like production designer for that, like taking the kind of the brand and interpreted that into their iOS app. You just pass those off to whoever they have developing it. Sometimes developers were like at the agency. Sometimes they would have some external shop that would develop them out. So it was definitely very like blind way of designing where you're just, okay, like here you go, seeing them until they're in a working app almost.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it was a different way of working, I think, than where it's at today, obviously. But
Yeah. I'm curious, did you have product managers and stuff for like requirements, or like where did like definition come from?
yeah, it was very old school, and it was like a creative director. Sometimes you might have a product or account manager that would oversee feedback and set meetings and maybe write expectations and things like that. But then you might have a creative director that kind of oversaw the vision for where it should go, and like designers underneath that, which I guess a lot of levels of product designer now, or like product design lead and manager. So I think it's maybe the term creative director is maybe less or more towards brand and marketing side of things, I feel like now versus how that's thought. But yeah, so it was definitely, yeah, more of an old school traditional agency type model in the way it was presented. But yeah, it was always weird kind of reviewing designs on PowerPoint slides. So like static ideas and pitches and that kind of stuff in a way that you wouldn't really consume a website or consume an app. You're looking at them and like these like very static things, not very in like an interactive way. Yeah. So
Yeah.
yeah, that's definitely
Super
changed.
interesting. What came after that for you?
After that's when I made my transition into in-house, which was Braintree at the time, which I was in Chicago. So that was one of the hot tech companies coming out of Chicago at the time. I think I joined, I think I was like employee maybe 130, 120, somewhere around there. But it was like pretty much right after the PayPal acquired Braintree and Venmo. So yeah, Venmo and Braintree were in the same office, and the design team was we worked on both a little bit. But yeah, that was where I dove into FinTech and learned about in-house design, and actually like saw the industry kind of shift towards in-house teams over, I think, utilizing like agencies or outsourcing certain things.
I'm curious, like, what did you think about that? Like, obviously, from the perspective of somebody going in house for the first time versus being at an agency and then seeing the industry shift towards that.
Yeah.
I guess my question is, it's like, how did you see that as an employee, right? Being like, oh, I get to be embedded and think about this, like, from the perspective of someone that gets to have like long term kind of like ownership and context. And also, did you see why the industry moved in that direction? Because there was some actual kind of benefit to it. Like, as opposed to, because I think about this a lot, right? As somebody that has done product at a bunch of different companies, and the agency model does appeal to me in some ways. And it's like, oh, you get reps, like you can go in, like quickly understand problems and deliver solutions as well. I was
Right.
curious about how you weighed the trade-offs at the time, and like how you might look back on it, just reflecting back now.
Right. Yeah, I mean, my certain risk that I had, I guess, going into it was like, am I going to be bored? I think as a designer, you're like, oh, I got to work on maybe 3 or 4 companies at once. And you are like maybe getting some fresh new ideas in. You're working across maybe a couple different industries, this optionality to it, where you're going into one company, right? You're just like, can I work on this one product for this one brand? Is it going to be fulfilling enough or interesting enough versus like kind of traversing maybe a variety of work. But I think, and then going in house and just seeing kind of the variety of work that exists, I think, especially for design, whether you're talking about marketing and brand and websites to very technical products and workflows and dashboards and things like that, there is like quite a variety in design.
Right.
And I obviously the real benefit I feel like obviously that people bring up is having all of that context and really deeply knowing the product to make swift decisions. But I also think it's coming there with a level of trust and like autonomy that you can have in house, where you learn the product and the team and the company begins to trust you as an individual or as a discipline within the company, so you can move a lot faster without having to maybe get all these approvals from like top down or from a variety of stakeholders. Or I think there is some level of checks and balances, obviously, as work goes out to make sure it's hitting the right notes or solving the right problems. But I think whether it's running over to someone's desk or having a 15-minute chat really quick, I think there's a lot more fluidity and trust and stuff that can be built in-house versus having that maybe, oh, on Thursday next week, we're going to review these designs, or it's very choppy where you're like giving feedback and then you're like having an agency go back to the drawing board or make edits and then try to come back with maybe another meeting or sending a link. I know the agency model, there's more modern agencies now that can move quicker or at a product team's pace. But I think at that time, I feel like there was like a lot more speed at an in-house team. I think so I think that's when it a little bit comes back in-house. I feel hiring becomes a lot more important because if you make the wrong hire, the design of your product or your deliverables are not going to look great. And it's hard to be like, okay, now we have to go hire this agency for all this money to do something. And we have to give them all this context and they don't know the product and all this kind of stuff. So I do think in-house teams, like seeing that, I think at Braintree at the time, which was very much, I would say, a technical company. Like I think we had 6 designers and there was maybe like 200 or 300 engineers. So it was like a very lopsided, like, design team to like ratio.
One thing that I'm like thinking about a lot, I think when I started doing the podcast, I was thinking about career transitions specifically because I found that talking to people about them, like when I was like a hiring manager interviewing them, it was like those transitions told me a lot about the person, what they cared about, their story, getting a sense of how they got to where they were like to this point in time. But the other thing that I think that I'm starting to get a lot more interested in, especially as I'm thinking about how work is changing and all that kind of stuff, is this idea of longevity. Like you were at Braintree for a few years, right?
Yeah, like six, I believe, like six
years. I feel like nowadays 6 years working in tech, like anywhere, is a good day. It's a solid tenure. And as somebody that was coming in thinking about, how am I going to get bored here? What were the things that kept you around? What were the moments where you thought maybe you might move on and then you decided to stay? What were the inputs like going into those decision points like during that time?
Yeah, I think finding the work interesting is a big one. Being able to like switch teams. I would say like the company itself was growing very fast. We were up and to the right pretty much every year I was there. Like it was moving very well. So I think seeing that trajectory and having an impact on that and continuously hitting new milestones every year, I think was like a big one. Like we didn't really have much of a downturn when I was there. So I feel the company doing well, the introduction of new products, like when we go into in-store payments or new tooling or a variety of new endeavors where it wasn't just necessarily like we're processing payments or we're just doing this one piece the whole time. That kind of kept things fresh and liking the team I'm working with and the company as a whole. But I think having a company that's doing well and making interesting products, and we were hiring, I would say all the designers I've worked with there have gone on to a variety of good places that I worked with designers that are on Apple, at Audion, at other startups, leading teams. So I felt like we had a really good core of designers at the time there, which I feel like we all fed off each other. So I feel like that was a good atmosphere. And so, so I think it was all those conditions were like really good. There wasn't really like, that's something I would say that I like would have made me like leave. I think I left because I felt like I had touched so much of the product, and you get to a point where you're like going back and fixing some things that you like did in the past, or am I redesigning this for the 3rd or 4th time, or this kind of, okay, now might be the time to look for something, especially being there after 6 years. And I think that was the time where like PayPal started to come in a little stronger as creating direction. We were pretty autonomous after they hired us to, you still do what you're going to do and own your trajectory. But then I think there started to be like more influence there, which kind of slowed things down and created more bureaucracy. And so that kind of quick startup pace was starting to dwindle a little bit. And I like the pace with startups and have jumped to other ones since then. So I think that's where I found my time. But
yeah, totally. So what did you end up looking for next? Where did you end up landing? I understand the push factors and also the kind of like sticking factors, right? Whereas there was actually enough to work on that kept you interested and motivated for a long period of time. You also
Right.
had a lot of people that you worked with that you seemed to really respect, got along with. Those working relationships, like that's obviously really crucial. And then
Yeah.
eventually and then the kind of like speed of execution, like your ability to be creative across multiple different projects and execute very quickly. All of those, maybe not the people, but like the execution part slow down with the bureaucracy. You're finding yourself on rotation with like old projects, like revisiting
Yeah.
things. And so like you're looking for, something fresh. Things got a little bit stale. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So what were you looking for next? And where did you end up landing?
Um, yeah. So I was looking, I wanted to get out of FinTech because I was like, felt like I had 6 years and I'd really dove into payments. And I was like, what else is out there? It was my first in-house job. So I ended up at the time I would transition from Chicago to Detroit. So I kind of was looking in like the Detroit startup space. So yeah, I ended up landing at a company called Bloomscape. There's like plant delivery, so like e-commerce. Uh, um, I liked plants, so it was like those two things, and they were looking for their first kind of in-house designer to help own the complete vision. So a little more lifestyle, where I was from helping art direct photo shoots and overall brand to
Oh,
working with CMS, like content management systems, and building out the website and obviously optimizing checkout flows and all of that.
sure.
So there was technical side of things to the brand side of things. Yeah. So that kind of came across my plate, and yeah, I ended up being there for, I think, a year and a half. Mostly because the company did very well during the pandemic because everyone was getting plant deliveries, and then it kind
Yeah.
of started to fall off a little bit after that and ended up going away a little bit. So that's when I transitioned out of that. But yeah, I think it was a transition to try something new, expand my design skill set into other areas, which really interested me. So that was a little time of like discovery and trying something different and seeing other aspects of like design and how they impact the company and the product and the bottom line and all of that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's very cool. So it sounds like the company itself had a huge pop like during the pandemic and then things started winding down. And yeah, how did you find yourself at High Note eventually?
Yeah. So it was around a time where I was thinking of kind of leaving the company because there was like some layoffs, and then I was still around at that point. A bunch of big layoffs. So then I was like, I was a designer and front end engineer and like a product manager. I was like playing
Okay.
all of these hats, and I don't want to be in this kind of, this kind of all encompassing role. It's like too much.
Can I ask a little bit about that? If you
Yeah.
ended up in this role partially because it was like it sounds like you took on the responsibility of like other people that were like let go and the company couldn't afford
Yeah.
anymore or whatever. Did you what about that did you like and dislike? And I'm curious, it sounds like it was a lot of work, but like you strike me as someone and identify as this kind of person too that like really likes to flex into different skill sets a lot of different times. And so and maybe I'm reading that wrong, but I'm curious if there was
Yeah.
anything that was somewhat compelling about that, just in terms of like diversity of activities that you got to do on a day to day basis.
Right. Yeah. So yeah, going back to my days at Braintree a little bit is so Braintree had a unique hiring for designers because they required designers to know how to code, front end
Okay,
code.
interesting.
So there was like even when during the interview process, there was a whiteboarding problem, but then there was another kind of like hour session where you had to try to start to code like your solution basically into basically just using HTML and CSS, like kind of like
Yeah,
a basic like understanding of at that time it was like the box model and how, padding and margin and
yeah.
how to do all those kind of basic things. But so there was like yeah, so that's where honestly I started to become less of like just a designer creating comps and passing off designs into a little bit more of like expanding into, oh, now I'm like doing some coding of like my own work. And
Did you
then,
did you
yeah,
have those technical skills coming in? Like you mentioned, like during the interview process, did that evolve over time? Were you picking up
yeah,
more of those skills while you were there?
I had taken some like coding classes in Chicago, like in-person coding classes of, yeah, learning basic, like how to create a website page and that kind of stuff. So I had some basic knowledge, but I hadn't really put it into practice, into like real world scenarios. So I had some stuff in my portfolio that was like, here's some example websites that I created that I was able to design and code at the time. But yeah, so the design team there was a mix of like designers that learned how to code or like front end engineers that learned how to design. So there was kind of
Yeah.
this kind of middle ground a little bit where you had people that were like maybe a little stronger in one and the other. But I think that helped also a little bit of the autonomy where I'm just going to go build this a little
Okay.
bit.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's, I would say there is where my skill set became more of, there was like a designer, but you're a front end engineer. And then there was a little bit of, oh, we're writing our own copy versus using just like filler text. And so it started to build there. So when I got to Bloomscape, there was a level of, oh, I can go in and add some stuff into the code base. Maybe there's a level of technical ability that a front end engineer might come into play, but it did allow for more flexibility, wearing more hats, I think, in that role, which I think, yeah, ultimately led to, oh, this guy can do all these things. So I need these other people.
Oh, okay. Yeah. That's a double-edged sword.
Yeah. So it was a little bit, and I was like, oh, okay, I don't know. I wouldn't trust me as like a replacement for a front end engineer. Like these two are very specialized fields, more of a generalist with, I think, a focus in design,
Yeah.
maybe. But yeah, I think that's where I had started to see myself thrive in kind of those startup environments where you're 1, 2, 3 designers. You need to move fast. You need to be able to, we have some autonomy there, but the ability to kind of design and get those designs into real, on a website, on a web page, in a product, updating a dashboard, I think provided like great value at a startup level where I feel like if you look at in-house teams that are 100 designers, they're very specialized in maybe a certain area. And there's like engineers and resources there. They don't necessarily maybe need to know how to design. But yeah, I know now obviously there's AI tools are coming into the forefront, which kind of, it brings this like should designers code back up a little bit. I feel
Yeah.
like it's always been there, but it's less about maybe knowing the syntax or how to code or how it works, but this like familiarity around code or this comfortableness around code, I think is coming back into play where it's okay, designers like need to know how code works a little bit.
Yeah. Tell me a little bit about how your time at Highnote, basically, how that has evolved since you joined and are in a design leadership role. How has your kind of, and we touched on this a little bit early on, obviously, but do you look for differences in how you're hiring today based with that same frame of I want designers that are like that don't just live in Figma, but are like comfortable being a little bit more curious in the tool set that they have at their disposal to put together interactive prototypes and stuff like that. Although Figma obviously has those tools and there's the Claude like integrations and everything. There's a lot
Right.
there, but what is the kind of like skill set and aptitudes that you're looking for today? And not just in terms of hiring for new people, but has it changed the kind of like skill like landscape of the team that you have today as well?
Yeah. So yeah, as we start to look, obviously like things are rapidly changing in the space. And so it's what's working now might be different in 6 months. But
Of course,
I
yeah.
think, yeah, but yeah, I think it's currently it's less of designers can push to prod, like they're writing code and pushing to production. I do that, but I'm a little more comfortable. I've been at the company for 4.5 years now, so I know how everything works. And but I think for some of the other designers on the team, it's or like someone coming in, it's more of making designs like can we quickly prototype or quickly iterate or see something that's more in like a workable, clickable format to then have that handoff with engineers or talking with product or maybe putting in front of customers as like a potential solution on or a new feature or product, making it a lot more real and closer to what it should be. And I think making that handoff clear versus taking a pixel perfect static comp, handing it to a
Yeah.
developer. maybe pairing with that kind of traditional handoff process into more of, oh, here's the problem I'm trying to solve. There might be like a few options. I'm going to quickly test a couple of these options, maybe go over those with products, or make them more interactive and kind of use AI tools like Cursor, Claude to pull in our design components, design variables, our like brand, to be able to make those as on brand as possible. But to create ideas, optionality, be able to iterate, I think, versus in the past, it's, oh, I want to create a new homepage. Let me spend 2 weeks creating 10 homepages using all the context that I have. And then we'll look at them and like maybe pick and choose some stuff. So I think AI brings into the forefront like the ability to, let's gather all this context and like knowledge on the brand and maybe the product requirements and all the stuff we kind of want to take, and let's create some options and then let's see where we're at. And I think will it down to a direction. But yeah, I mean, there's talking to other, I think, designers in the space. Everyone's, I think, testing out into their own workflows. And, but yeah, I would say front-end engineering at Highnote, use it daily, use Claude all the time. And I think like the design process, we're getting into where does it fit the best into that process when you're working on like a large code base with PCI compliant data and like all this stuff where it might not be able to access certain things. And it becomes a little bit different, but I think, also trying to create a platform that product teams can use to visualize ideas that are a little more on brand or something that might be a little more real too, versus a very maybe generic dashboard or generic output to be something that they could show a potential merchant or an existing one as well. But yeah, I think it's still learning, but I think there's a knowledge. I think with hiring, it's like a level of comfortableness or ability or curiosity, or they've used those tools or have a perception as to how they might utilize them or ways they could, or ones that they've tried and maybe why they were good or not. So I think it's a little bit less of, are they afraid of them or not? Or are they adaptable into using new tools? Like, I think we started the conversation about designing in Photoshop, and then you were designing in Sketch, and then it was Figma. And then they've had these variety of tools through time. And I see these tools like Cursor and Claude and others that come up as like tools to kind of help that process. But ultimately, you need to have good design skills to get a good output from these tools too. So it's like you have to, whether it's knowing how to prompt or knowing how to establish a good design system and good practices and be able to verbalize that and articulate that and describe that to get the right output, just being like, I want a futuristic looking homepage for this brand or whatnot. We talked about you can get a good generic output, but to get stuff that's really solving the problem are going to be more unique or stand out in the space, I think you do need those like design thinking skills a bit more.
Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense. And I what I got from you here is, I think, a good sense of what will change versus what won't change. The need for quality design skills and being thoughtful and getting the best quality output, that need is still going to be there. And I think the table stakes for what makes a good designer has gone up a little bit, is I think what we were talking about over in the LinkedIn comments too, right?
Yeah. I think it's like more skill sets or just more curiosity or kind of expanding upon. Yeah, it's like I look at the pendulum of product from like low fidelity to high fidelity, right? You have, I have an idea, and then it goes into the like, what is it? Why? How are we going to do this? Into like product, and then you kind of product design like maybe defines those things, and then there's the handoff to development that now we need to like execute on this. We need to this stuff. What code base should we use? What databases should we use? What front end frameworks? Like on all of those technical things, and you get into QA, all this stuff. So you get this like pendulum of these like very open ended things until, I'm going to funnel this down until, I know what I need to build and I just need to execute on it and get it produced. Where I think I think, yeah, I'm less scared, I think, about design in the age of AI because I think it's the ability to identify and having the skill set to build something beautiful and solve problems and create something that's going to have an impact. I feel like those decisions are still really big, where the like, how does it get built from like a code perspective, to me feels AI will just get better at that in terms of just like best coding practices and like pushing that out. But we'll see where it lands. But I think to me, that's where I see that going a bit.
Yeah, no, that's actually really helpful to get your perspective on. You're not worried about design as much when it comes to AI. And and what I understand, and I think this is great. Like for me as a product manager, I feel like every day I'm seeing content about like how we're all going to be out of jobs and like all this other stuff, and I don't buy it. I think there obviously going to be some near term disruptions, but from my perspective, I'm like a techno optimist, right? Like I do think that we're going to find work to do. There won't be a shortage of problems to solve, and it seems to me like what I'm hearing from you is that like design is always going to have a really important influence in making those decisions and like doing the work of deciding and calibrating and like understanding how to solve those problems.
Yeah. Yeah. I think I like saw, it might have been a post or like a quote I saw around basically just, I love design. I love solving problems. I don't like AI, but AI is like a tool, and whatever tool I need to use to solve a problem, I'll use that tool. But at the end of the day, design is what I love, or design thinking is what I love. And I think there's this level of, I think, yeah, we talked a little bit about the change in tooling over the years, but I think, yeah, there is this, obviously AI will probably have maybe a perspective on what the solution might be, but I feel like some of that is only as good as all of the context and insight that you can kind of give it to
Yeah.
create a solution, whether it's myself giving it that context or if it has to go out somewhere and find that. I feel like that's where it loses it, of being on calls with customers or being in meetings, or I think there's a level of knowing what's happening in the industry or like trends or that kind of stuff that it can pull from. But I feel like there's definitely those anecdotal things that happen through conversations with varieties of stakeholders that it does not have to create the output. So
Yeah, there's this like reading between the lines, like when a customer is asking for something or talking about their pinpoints and like really
yeah,
understanding like what they're saying behind like the thing that they're telling you explicitly that
right.
maybe
And I
you'll
feel
get
like,
there, but
yeah, and I feel like design, I think we talked about this kind of at the beginning of the conversation, is with like portfolios of, but there's a level of like feeling with design too, of like how design makes you feel, not just is this getting me more traffic, or the metrics on like maybe what a good design versus a bad design is doing, or how usable is this from like how a form should be created and used, to
sure.
like how does this emotionally make me feel? Do I enjoy using it? Like those kind of like anecdotal things that someone might not explicitly say, but comes through in like maybe why you choose one product over another product. Of, do you enjoy using their tools, or how does their brand or color feel? Does it make you feel confident? I think when working in fintech, there's this level of trust, like the idea of designing for trust, that kind of comes up, where you're like trying to check out, or if something moves too fast or too slow, or you're held up, or you're getting weird errors, or do you trust this checkout, or is the card working the way it's supposed to? Or it's like anecdotal things that I think people like expect or make them feel a certain way, that I feel are hard to like capture in like a data metric type of way. Maybe,
Yeah.
I guess, like the qualitative versus quantitative a bit. But I feel like those, yeah, I don't know yet how AI will be able to like, oh, people are gonna love this and react to this in this emotional way, maybe, over this other thing, versus UX design could basically be like, these are good UX principles and we're gonna follow those and create this interface based on those. And it's very good, but maybe it's the same as a lot of other products? And does that move the needle for your company or product versus trying to maybe do something different or get a different emotional response too?
Yeah. Do you think like in this world where that kind of like emotional response ends up being, it's basically like the higher stakes, right? You've got the table stakes of something that's functional and basically not saying that it's necessarily AI slop or whatever, but there is like generic AI like look and feel to a lot of these
Right,
hard
right.
coded apps, let's say. But in this world, does brand become like the competitive edge factor in terms of like products, right? Is it the sense of, I mean, there's this kind of like, how does it make you feel and how usable is it, obviously. But then there's this other sense of, do I identify this thing that I'm using, right? Does it
Yeah.
achieve something from an identity perspective beyond just like a functional job to be done?
Yeah. Because, I could see in a world that kind of base design system, your kind of manifesto, like whole brand vision and how you want it to be perceived, like creating something like that's like very robust and very meticulous to have these tools to pull from to create things. I think that in of itself, I think is gonna, like you mentioned, brand a little bit. Like I think that might become more of the skill is to be able to build something like that where, designers or product or engineers or whoever at the company could build off of that, where you're creating these very kind of robust frameworks and rules and contexts that you can maybe iterate on and continue to evolve. And I think I'm currently working on one with our technical writers around documentation writing and writing rules and how it should like brand voice and all that kind of stuff. And I think defining these like parameters to like, how should your brand, look, or how should it talk, or what type of motion does it have? Or I think all
Yeah.
of these like defining contexts and principles, I think being able to articulate that and visualize that, I think might become maybe a bigger skill set than maybe designing something pixel perfect artboard and Figma is maybe like less where time is spent.
Yeah, totally makes sense. Stephen, did I give you an opportunity to talk about stuff that you want to talk about? I feel like I just dove in and asked you whatever struck my
No,
curiosity.
yeah, no, I know. Yeah, I know our conversation spun from design hiring a bit,
It's okay. I mean, that was where it started. But I wanted to know
but
more
like,
about you as well. So I hope that's okay. Yeah.
no, yeah, I think that's good. Yeah, obviously, I feel like the big conversation now in design is around AI and tools and workflows that are evolving, and um, but yeah, I think we cover a lot of it. I feel like this move towards opening design up a bit more and being comfortable in code and getting more technical, but not being afraid of the terminal.
Yeah, fair enough.
But yeah, I'm actually transitioning. So I'm actually transitioning to a new job in two
Okay.
weeks into the AI agent company. I'm
Well,
kind of getting
congratulations.
into
Oh,
that
cool.
world. Yeah.
Yeah. Can you tell us more about it or?
Yeah, yeah. So I'm moving to a company called Deck. They're out of Montreal. And yeah, I'm gonna be first like kind of principal product designer. So very hands-on there, like their first one. Um and yeah, they're trying to build agents that can either do various tasks for you without the need to, if you just have basically like no APIs needed. So you would just have to utilize
Mm,
through no code. They have some products now that kind of get all the data from all these kind of random places that might not have great APIs or access to APIs. So you think of a utilities company or like a city website or something like that, that companies can actually just like with logins and with some basic functionality can grab whatever types of data you want.
sweet. Yeah.
So it's basically creating this world of agents that can go access things for you or do tasks for you or get everything with you without the need for deep APIs or matching the right types of API frameworks or calls or really the need for like engineers and people from a technical background, which I think working in FinTech, like data comes up quite a bit. So I think, transitioning to that a little bit and more of a broader space of all types of kind of data and tasks and things like that. So I definitely will probably have more perspective once getting into building an AI product.
Yeah.
So definitely more to come there. But
Yeah, if you're open to it, I would love to do another one of these at some point when you have more to say in the world that you're about to enter too. Because I do think I got a lot out of just from the perspective of what we had started talking about, which was like, how is hiring changing and product and design and what does that mean? And,
right.
what is likely to be rewarded in this world? But now you're actually like going into building for this world as well, which I think is like super exciting.
It's evolving a bit. But I think I feel like I've worked on different aspects of I think different workflows and seen different sides of products. And so I think this can be another perspective to add to that, how that shifts.
I look forward to following your work, Stephen. This is really great. Cool. I really appreciate you taking the time.
Yeah, thanks for setting it up.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for answering the call. I want to talk about the thing that really stayed with me from that conversation because I think it's slightly different from what the conversation was ostensibly about. On the surface, Stephen and I were talking about design, what AI changes about portfolios, what hiring managers are looking for now, and whether designers should code. And all of that was interesting and worth your time. But the thing that landed for me was the idea about where the valuable work is moving. And I think that could be applicable across roles and disciplines, etc. Stephen made the point that if you can produce a technically correct, well-structured interface using AI tools, and honestly, almost anyone can now, you haven't differentiated yourself. What differentiates you is the layer upstream from that. The brand manifesto, the design principles, reiterating some of the stuff I talked about before we dove into the conversation. The voice and motion rules and the visual identity that act as instructions for everything built on top of them. That's where judgment compounds. And that's what AI actually needs from you in order to produce something good. And I keep thinking about how that applies beyond design, because the same logic holds in product and operations and almost any knowledge work that I can think of. The tactical execution is getting faster and cheaper, but also when I really think about it, that's not where the bulk of the intuition and research and systems level thinking and strategy actually goes, right? What's getting more valuable is the ability to define the parameters to build the system that others and increasingly machines execute against. Stephen is actually putting this into practice. He wrapped up our conversation by telling me that he's leaving FinTech to join Deck, an AI agent startup, as their first principal product designer, not just thinking about what AI means for his craft, but building for it. I thought that that was a pretty good punctuation mark on everything that we had just talked about. The test that he offered, and I think it's the simplest, most honest version of what we were circling when it comes to whether or not you're afraid of the terminal. It's not about whether you know the syntax. It's whether you're curious enough to figure it out. That's really the durable thing. As you start to move upstream, what can you comfortably delegate by getting uncomfortable using tools that you may not have used before? Thanks for listening to the Push Pull podcast, and I'll see you next time.